My name is Catherine Denny, and I'm a professional musician and a theater director. I taught elementary school for 22 years. And this has been a really exciting way that we have spent the pandemic when everything I was supposed to do was canceled.
Hi, I'm Bryce Denny. I'm an electrical engineer, also an amateur pianist and sometimes singer. And this project has been a fun sort of problem-solving technical thing and also musical thing, and a way to connect with people, even though it's been, the normal ways of connecting are difficult. But we've met so many people and sung with so many people this year just because of this project. It's been a lot of fun.
Hi, my name's Sandy Gubin. I'm a social psychologist and a program evaluator and a sometime choir wrangler. I'm here to be a driveway choir evangelist.
All right, let me get the screen going here. Can everyone see okay? And Sandy, if you can keep adding people, admitting people in the waiting room, because we won't be able to see it quite as well as you. Okay?
Yes. However,
are you able to?
I'm not getting any information about that.
Yeah, I'll have to do that. That's fine.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
That's
no problem.
right.
It's not telling me.
Sandy, you're the one with the echo.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I
Talking about the history. Just saying what's on this slide.
And we solved the echo.
Yeah, it's not just Sandy.
Are you hearing an echo from our screen?
No.
No. Okay, good. I think we can mute everyone else.
When I talk, I am when Sandy talks.
Interesting.
What about now? Do you hear it now? You hear an echo?
I do.
Huh.
Yes.
Well,
Everybody but the Denny's.
should
Maybe
mute.
maybe it's us.
Are you saying it's not us?
Right.
Okay.
You don't have an echo.
Okay. Then
So
we'll just
maybe
mute
if Sandy can mute when she's not talking.
Nina.
Okay, I'm going to do mute all and then unmute ourselves. All right.
Okay. All right. This workshop is designed to let you know how Driveway Choir came to be and to understand the audio equipment and radio waves that we have come to understand as we are doing this. We're also going to reiterate how safely the reason that we did this is so that everyone can sing together safely during COVID. And we're going to give you a little taste of how you would start out if you wanted to try it for yourself.
Sandy, would you like to speak to this one?
So I am shortly going to put into the chat a link so that you can give us your email to get information about workshop materials. And we'll talk about that more later.
You can also feel free to put questions into the chat and we will ask them at relevant times. Oops. All right, Sandy.
Okay, looks like I'm up. So what is a driveway choir anyway? And it is a way for us to sing together safely during COVID. So people sing from inside their cars. The sound of their voices is carried through microphones into a sound mixer. You can see the microphones with the cables there leading to that gray box, which is the sound mixer. And then the sound is carried from the sound mixer, its output, to a low-powered FM radio transmitter. It's basically the same kind of transmitter that radio stations use, except reaching a very small area. And then that radio signal then allows the singers to hear themselves by listening on a radio. People can use their car radios or just a portable radio to listen.
So here's a little about planning an event. Boy, should we stop and try to fix this echo thing?
Yes. Try the settings.
Just when Sandy speaks.
I think it could be us. So maybe, okay, here, Sandy, can you try speaking? And I'm going to mute myself for a second.
This is a test 1, 2.
That was better.
Okay, then we will mute ourselves when it's your turn.
We'll mute when Sandy's speaking. I'm sorry about that. The internal mic is not working, and so we're using an external one. What do you know? Tech problems.
And we're supposed to be the tech people.
Aye. Okay. So here's some information about just how we organize a driveway choir, what kinds of things we're thinking about, what kinds of things we're doing. So several weeks before the event, we're thinking about, well, obviously publicizing it, inviting people, defining what it is, what the music is going to be, and sending email to people, building up a list of who wants to come. Since we don't want to pass out music and have people like all touching the same music, we usually will ask people to print out the music. We'll send it in a PDF or something, and send out and have people either print it out or plan to put it on a iPad or some other device so that if they don't want to print it out. So we'll send out basic instructions, but there's still some of the details need to wait until the last minute because it's sort of a weather dependent thing, and various kinds of details can wait until the last minute.
So usually a couple of days before an event, it becomes less tentative because you have a firmer idea of what the weather's going to be like. So we started this in the summer when we had to worry about heat, and also we did a lot of things during the week right before sunset. And then as the fall came and people were back to work more, we did things in the weekend, and we've sort of nailed down that 2 p.m. tends to be the warmest part of the day. So in the fall and winter, we've been doing weekend afternoons, and sometimes we'll say it's going to be sometime this weekend. And then as it becomes closer, it's clear that Sunday is a lot warmer or drier or whatever than Saturday. So we'll just confirm the location, the time, and then remind everybody what to bring. Don't forget your mask, don't forget your water, don't forget your music. And we also
nowadays blankets.
Yes, sleeping bags, baked potatoes. And now we have, and then we also assign people microphones so that they know which, it's easier for us if we say, okay, 3C is going to be for Sandy, and then she can drive up and have the number 3C in her windshield, and we can say, here you go.
So on the day of the event, so we're packing the car and we bring everything to wherever we're going, and set up, of course, the audio stuff. While singers arrive, we like to have something playing on the radio station, because as we'll describe later, we're using a temporary radio station that's different every time. And so, oh yeah, that's another thing that we email to them if we know in advance what radio station it'll be.
Right.
But as they're arriving, we say, okay, tune in to 89.2 or 3 or something. And so we want them to immediately be able to hear something. So there's often music on a loop or something so that they're listening to something real. We're deciding where are they going to park, how to orient everybody. So because of the sun, you don't want sun in everybody's eyes as they're trying to see the song leader. So we try to put the song leader so that the song leader is looking into the sun and everyone else is looking away from the sun. We often set up parking in sort of semicircles. So there'll be sort of the leader in the middle, and then a row of cars in a semicircle pointing toward them. And then if there are more people, then they'll be in a second row that are sort of squeezing, peeking through the gaps in the first row. So the parking aspect of it.
And then after an event, a lot of people like either the recording or a video of their work. And we're going to share with you a video that we made from our event last weekend.
Okay, please let us know if the audio from this video is working, okay? On January 23rd, 2021, we hosted a People's Music Network sing-along in Arlington, Mass.
I can't hear it at
But
all.
singing indoors
Oh, no.
during a pandemic is unsafe, so what we did instead was meet in a parking lot, hand out sanitized microphones, and sing from inside our cars.
I'm not sure what's
We used an
going
audio...
on.
We found in an earlier workshop it may depend which version of Zoom you're using. Some people hear it, some people don't. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Does anyone
but
hear
I
this?
didn't even hear it, so the audio mixer and a low power...
There it is.
I did not hear it.
I heard
I
it.
heard it fine.
Okay.
I heard it.
Okay, just 1 second.
Hang
I
on.
was hearing it.
Okay, good.
On January 23rd, 2021, we hosted a People's Music Network sing-along in Arlington, Mass. But singing indoors during a pandemic is unsafe, so what we did instead was meet in a parking lot, hand out sanitized microphones, and sing from inside our cars. We used an audio mixer and a low-power FM transmitter to send the choir sound to car radios. In the Driveway Choir workshop, we'll talk about how this works and what the experience is like.
There is more peace. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Fighting corporate greed. Fighting corporate greed. I'm gonna let it shine. Fighting corporate greed. I'm gonna let it shine. Fighting corporate greed. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Everybody got another one? Yes, I do. Go ahead. Do we all have what we need? I'm gonna let it shine. Tell me how. Till we all have what we need, I'm gonna let it shine. Until we all have what we need, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
In the shelter of each other, in the shelter of our lives, we are open, and we are dreaming, we are hopeful, and we are wise. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Sandy.
Beautiful song.
How good it is, how sweet it is, to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is, to be together on this day. Name a tov, umanayim, shevelachim kanyacham. Name a tov, umanayim, shevelachim kanyacham. Shevelachim kanyacham. We will rise as one. Shout out loud. We will rise as one. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
On January 23rd, 2021, we hosted.
So that's what we have morphed in.
On January 23rd, 2020.
Okay, so that's where we are now. But where did we start? So about 10 months ago, we all heard that singing was suddenly dangerous for people to do in the same room. And we tried virtual choirs. We did live stream recitals, and those were fine. We enjoyed them, but we had the advantage of having 4 people in our family who could sing choral music because we have 2 kids who can kind of supply the other parts. And meanwhile, I was seeing everyone post on Facebook that I miss singing so much. And so we really wanted to figure out how to include more people. So we got together a couple of friends. I'm a soprano, so we got an alto, a tenor, and a bass, who came to our driveway, and we gave them all the same type of headset, and we used a mixer, and we found that we could really hear each other well, and we each stayed in our little bubble with our windows closed and knew that our aerosols would all stay in our own family unit. And I posted something on Facebook that kind of showed, wow, we were a safe choir. So
that video helped us to find other people who were trying to do different things. So the video was sort of explaining, here's what we did. We used this equipment. There were 4 of us. Here's some recordings. So people who saw that video said, you should really talk to David Newman because he's working on this too. But he was doing it a different way. He was using wireless microphones and radio. And so we Zoomed with him, and we decided to team up and try to spread the knowledge and solve some problems together. So I worked on writing a document that explains the different choices you're making about, what size of mixer and what kinds of microphones and how will people hear the sound. And so I worked on writing it down, and we thought, okay, and then we'll organize some workshop like this to teach people. But it turned out that based on the videos and social media, a group in New Jersey called Somerset Hills Harmony, and Christian Hunter was super excited about the idea, and they went and tried some small scale tests and then some large scale. They did all kinds of innovating, and they organized a giant webinar series. There were five 2-hour sessions on different weeknights. Some of them twice even, and they really spread the word throughout the barbershop societies and different places. So it was really a combination of all of these different groups collaborating. It's been an exciting sort of community building thing. There's a lot of, everyone's encouraging each other and sharing, what kind of batteries do you use, and what kind of, I'm having this hum in my mixer, what should I try? All kinds of things. So it's really quite a community at this point. Mostly through Facebook groups, but also email and other things.
So we're going to help you navigate through our Driveway Choir website. So it's just drivewaychoir.org.
Or also, if you Google for Driveway Choir, you'll find it. So I just want to just briefly go there, and you'll see what it looks like.
It's funny because all of the other groups had much more clever words. Like David Newman had the cartoons, and other people were like hot rods and harmony. And we're like, well, Driveway Choir is kind of boring, but we're the only people who come up when you type those words in. So started in our driveway, and here we are.
So just to give a sense of what's here. So on this website, there are videos of people doing stuff. So sometimes us and sometimes other people. We've tried to collect lots and lots of examples of videos. The news stories, there's the history, which we touched on, but you can find it in a lot more detail here with video, of course. And then in the resources section, so I want to point out these 2 here. So this is under resources, technical details. So this thing is a Google Doc. It's about 40 pages, and it sort of, explains at a sort of, so I want to say, I'm an amateur audio guy. I learned all kinds of things in the last year, but I started with, I knew how to record myself with a four-port mixer, and that was it. So I've learned all kinds of stuff, and I've written whatever I know down here. So this document, and then this one here is pointer to all the webinars by the Somerset Hills Harmony Group. So these are both really great resources for going deeper into this. Okay.
So how many people actually do this?
I'll turn it over to Sandy, and I'll mute us so that we don't cause echo.
Nice segue. I just also want to say that at the end of our presentation, there's a whole bunch of resources. And so if you get a copy of our slides, there's like a gazillion resources, not only the stuff that Catherine and Jenny just talked about, Catherine and Bryce just talked about, but lots more too. That said, how many people are doing driveway choirs, and who the heck are they? It turns out that there's a lot. If you look at the map there, those are all of the states and provinces where people have been doing driveway choir meetings. And those little markers represent both established groups and groups that are just getting up and running. But all of them have had at least a few meetings. So there's about 40 choirs represented there. Yeah. Do you want to progress me to the next slide, you guys? And who is doing it? So there's a wide variety of groups doing this. There's like a shape note group in Newton, Massachusetts. There's barbershop groups all over. There's community choirs. There's religious choirs. From what I could tell, no synagogues, all churches. And probably the most common group is the barbershop groups. And that's because of the seminar that was run by the Barbershop Harmony Society that we just talked about. And I'm ready for my next slide. Okay, and so the other thing that I noticed is that people are doing some pretty innovative stuff. I did some interviewing of people who were involved with driveway choirs and did some other kinds of research. And I was just kind of floored by all the cool stuff people are doing. For instance, there's a group in Minnesota called the Upper Upers, and they are doing singing Valentines. So they show up at your house by prior arrangement, I should add, and they tell you what radio station to tune to, and they sing a song from their cars. And they also optionally deliver roses and chocolate. That's a fundraiser actually for the group. There's people with aphasia who are participating in a weekly rehearsal in New Jersey with Sing Aphasia. And then the Somerset Hills barbershop groups, which I think we're just talking about, they had like this fabulous Christmas caroling event where they had guests come and everybody sang in their cars, the choir and the community. And they, had the audio coming from the driveway choir, but then they had people do Zoom as well, so that for visuals. And then they took those visuals of the choir and they put them up on a big screen, so you could see the people singing, and they like synced the lights to the sound of the music. So it was quite an extravaganza, but really fun stuff. And then I think the Dennys have done, you guys did like a Messiah Sing, right? And you've done, I don't know, like 35 other groups you've brought together. And I don't know if you want to talk about that now or later, but yeah. Okay, and so I'm ready for my next slide. So Nina, I saw your question in the chat. There's one other group that I know of that was interested in threshold choirs, and we can talk about it later if you want. Okay, so I'm going to say a few things that we kind of already know, and then I'm going to talk about how they're germane in terms of driveway choirs. So everybody knows springing spreads respiratory droplets and aerosols more than many other activities. About 40% of COVID cases have no symptoms at all. And roughly 50% of COVID cases of transmission occur from asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic spread. can you push me along? Okay, thanks. Okay, so here are some of the protocols that people have developed. And I should say that these safety protocols are from a variety of different groups. And this is like not advice that you should necessarily use for your choir. You have to attend to what the advice you get from like medical and scientific advisors when you get going. But here's what other choirs have been doing. Probably the most universal one is stay in your car. And stay in your car with the windows rolled up or nearly rolled up. That's pretty important. Another one is that if you should get outside of your car, you should wear a mask, but really you should just stay in your car. So lots of groups, in fact, I think all of them, sterilize microphones and microphone windscreens before handing them out. And some choirs actually take their microphones home every week, especially wired, especially choirs that use wired microphones. So you just bring your microphone every week if you're a choir in some of a member of some of those choirs. People also park cars about 12 feet apart. Oftentimes people use a health form, which choir members should fill out before they show up, saying that, you're healthy and that you aren't waiting for a COVID result or living with someone who has COVID, that kind of thing. And one innovation has been to have a QR code so that if your choir members have forgotten to fill out that form, when they show up, you can give them the QR code, they point their phone at it, and then they can just fill out their form right there at rehearsal. And then another thing that folks have done is have your members agree to safety rules in the registration form. Some people, and by some people, I mean my co-presenters, have people do that. When people register, you also have to, say, I'm healthy and here are the rules I agreed to follow. If people are interested, you can contact me after. I have a couple of copies of different safety rules that people have used and also different forms people have used. And then finally, another idea is to have a safety sentinel. That's someone whose sole job it is to remind people to keep their masks on and to be following COVID safe behaviors.
There's a question in the chat that I would just like to answer with how we sterilize our microphones, because we have 24 that we take to every event and we give them to different people each time. So we chose microphones that are easy to clean with Clorox wipes. So we just surface clean all of the parts that can be touched. And we have several sets of these windscreens that can be washed with antibacterial soap, and then we dry them. We have to kind of plan ahead so that they're dry by the next event. And then I always use gloves when I'm preparing them, putting them back on, and then I'm wearing a glove when I hand them out to each singer.
So some groups have, some groups will wash them and then put them into plastic bags, and then they hand the person the plastic bags. We haven't done that. It's easy, like when you have a big pile of mics all lined up, it's easy to go down and wipe all the handles with Clorox all at once just before people arrive. So that it's pretty easy to mass wash many mic handles. But that's actually one of the reasons we're using handheld mics instead of headsets and things, because they're easier to wash.
Yeah, and I guess I want to say one last thing, which is, so some choir members are tentative and nervous about coming back to sing. And so having a clear picture of what you're going to be doing safety wise, and then expressing that and communicating that clearly to your choir members can be really impactful in terms of getting people to feel safe to come back. And I'm ready for my next slide. Okay, so I took the occasion of doing this presentation to do a little research into when we might get back to singing normally. So Anthony Fauci and others are estimating we'll need a 90% vaccination rate to stop the epidemic, particularly due to new, more contagious strains, as somebody was saying in the chat. So the final quarter of 2021 has been suggested as a time that we might reach that milestone. But I leave it to you all to decide whether or not that might be. Some people are skeptical about that date, and some health experts think that likely. And all of this is not taking into account the presence of new variants of COVID. Okay. I think we're ready for our next slide.
All right, the next section is about technology, but we haven't stopped and asked for questions. If people would like to talk about any of the material we've covered already, then please go ahead. Any questions so far?
Okay, then we'll move on to technology.
All right. Here's sort of a representation. Here, let me close this video thing. Here's a representation of a choir with wireless mics. So on the right, we have lots of people in cars, and they're all holding a wireless mic that looks like this. And then, so using radio, we get the signal over to the wireless mic receivers, which are these boxes here. We'll show them in more detail later. And then a mixer combines the sound together. We send the sounds from the mixer to an FM transmitter, and the FM transmitter sends the sound to any radios in the immediate area. So we're using a low power radio station, and it can be heard in the parking lot, but not further away. It's not a regular radio station. It's a temporary one, which you locate in the gaps between the regular commercial radio stations. So the next slide is wired, a choir using wired mics, and it's similar, but a little different. So if everyone's on wired mics, then Catherine has a wired one. Then of course there are wires sticking out of everyone's car, and you can roll your window up almost all the way, but not all the way. And this is actually it's easy to accidentally put the window up all the way and break the wire. So don't do that. So then we've got a snake here. If you're not familiar, we're talking about an audio snake, not a reptile snake. And so the snake is kind of like an extension cord for microphone cables. And it's really helpful in a case like this where the mixer might be, let's say, 50 feet away or 40 feet away or something. And so the snake, you can plug many people's cars into the snake box that has a bunch of XLR ports, and then one big fat cable goes the distance to the mixer. So if you're thinking about many wired mics, you definitely want to look into a snake.
And if you'll notice, the Hot Rods and Harmony, this is the way they do all of theirs. Their members have bought one of these and 25 feet of cable, so they arrive to an event and say, "Here's the end of my cable, stick it in the snake," and they're set.
Right. I should also just take the time to mention some these slides that say Hot Rods and Harmony. They came from the sessions, the webinars that were back in September, October, November. I helped in some of them, but it was an amazing set of information, and they're still online, so they're a great source of information. All right. So let's talk about the FM transmitter. So all of us are used to radios. We listen to car radios. We've probably, you may have a portable one, but not so many of us are familiar with being your own radio station. So using an FM transmitter is like broadcasting your own tiny low power radio station. So obviously there has to be an agreement of what frequency is going to be broadcast and what frequency you're going to listen to. Everyone can think of 90.9 or some favorite radio station in their area. So the broadcasters have a giant FM transmitter and probably a giant tower, and they broadcast on a certain frequency, and then anyone in the area can listen. In these parking lot choirs, you have to choose a radio station, and you program it in. You see on this one, it looks like it's programmed in 98 or something. So you program in, you have an up and down button, and you tell the transmitter what radio station you want to use, and it takes audio signals from your mixer or wherever and sends them out onto the radio. most groups are using one kind of like, so the $100 range radio transmitter. Some groups, there exist $10 ones, and you can try it, but we found that it doesn't really have a lot of range. Like there's not even really space for an antenna in here, because it's like the size of a car key or something. It's very, very small. So you can give it a try, but most of us end up springing for the $100 one because it just sounds better and it transmits further. So everyone's going to be listening to the radio, and of course there are a bunch of choices of what kind of radio, what shape of radio to use. So car radios, they work for most people. Most people have a good sounding car radio in their car, better than a $10 little portable guy. But there's some downsides of using your car radio. One is that the car could run out of battery by the end, and that does happen. So we carry jumper cables around just in case.
We learned.
It's like if there's 30 people come and listen in their car, probably one of them will need a jump start.
Almost always.
Maybe two. Some people like radio headsets like this. Generally, if they have an antenna, it's better than the ones that don't. But there are all kinds of different radios, and you can try different kinds.
And these little ones that are, maybe the size of your wallet. I don't know. They can be really good.
They can be okay.
We have a couple that are great.
It has to be loud enough that you can hear the other singers over your own voice. So if it's a really wimpy little radio, then as soon as you're singing, you won't be able to hear your friends anymore, right?
Yeah, but let's talk about why we might want to have an exterior one and not just your car radio, because some high-end cars, especially like Lexus and Subaru, will have a slight delay, like of half a second or something, just which you wouldn't even notice if you're careening down the Mass Pike or whatever, but it would make your sound be a second behind the rest of the chorus, and that throws everybody off. So
right.
we
You'll be
have
late
a little
all the time.
Yeah, so we have a
if
little
you're hearing
test.
a late sound.
Okay, say your name. 1, 2, 3, Catherine. And then we'll be able to find, oh, Emily has and then I'll go and hand her a little portable radio, and then she would turn off her car. So that's that.
So I talked about choosing a radio frequency. So one easy way to do that is there's a website where you can put in you put in your location, and it'll tell you what radio stations are near you. So in this case, we're looking for gaps. We're not looking for radio stations to listen to. We want to find a place where there is none. So with radio stations, you may notice that they're all 0.1, 0.3, 0.5, 0.7, 0.9. For some reason, odd numbers. I don't know why. But here's a good gap. So it's like between 102.9, there's a 103.1 gap, but that's not a very big gap. This gap is awesome. There is no 103.5, so I'm going to choose 103.7 because there's a good gap so that I won't be affected accidentally by 103.3 or 104.1. If you find a big gap, that's great. This depends a lot on where you live. If you're way out in the country, there are probably lots of gaps. There are lots of places, but if you're closer to a city, you may have to experiment and see what frequency works the best. All right. So this is Sandy, right?
Yep.
What
Okay.
is
Yeah. So what is a mixer? So most people know something about microphones, and almost everybody has a radio. But mixers are like a key piece of equipment in this approach that people really haven't heard much about. At least some people haven't. So I'll spend just a minute talking about what they are. So a mixer is an electronic device for combining sounds of many different audio signal inputs. So for instance, mics from people singing, or mics that are picking up an acoustic instrument like a guitar, or mics that are plugged directly into a keyboard. So the combined sound then gets sent out to an audience to hear, and usually before COVID, of course, we used loudspeakers for that. So if you look at the mixer picture up on the screen, you can see the microphones get plugged in on the top by those red arrows. And then if you look underneath the arrows, you'll see there's like a red strip and an orange strip and a green one and a blue one. So those strips kind of belong to the microphone that gets plugged in at the top of each one. And so that enables you, for instance, so all of those knobs on that long strip control the sound for the microphone at the top. So you could like turn somebody up if they're a very quiet singer, or turn somebody down if they're a really loud singer, that kind of thing. Yeah, so the sound in output is up here. If you look, I think it says something like sound output. Yep, right there. And you can also control the volume of everybody's mixed together sound down there. And last thing I want to say is that a lot of mixers have a lot of knobs and buttons and lights, and you don't need to use many of them for driveway choir work. And so don't like be too intimidated by looking at a mixer. You can do it. And that's, I think we're ready for our next slide.
All right. So here are a few pictures of wired microphones. With wired microphones, almost all of them, fortunately, the technology has not changed that much for a long time. And so if you find a used one from 1980, it's very likely to work. It might be great. So most wired microphones have an Xlr connection like this. So Xlr is a round connector with 3 pins. And then, of course, it has a round connector with 3 holes that plug into it. So that's Xlr. And that's very, very common for mics. Some wired mics have a switch and some don't. Like this model, you can buy it with a switch or without. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's useful to be able to turn yourself off, like if you're going to sneeze or if your phone rings or something like that. But at the same time, if you're giving it to 20 people and they haven't used microphones before, they may switch themselves off and not even realize it. So I guess experienced mic people may prefer a switch, and less experienced mic people may not want to have a switch. So these are all different kinds. We've been using SM48s and SM58s whenever we use wired mics, and that was on the suggestion of Rob France and Christian Hunter.
And they're pretty directional. If you put your voice anywhere in this area, it will pick it up, but it doesn't do so much to the side, so it won't pick up the rest of your car, which reduces feedback.
So I'm going to assume many people know about wired mics, and so I'll spend more time talking about wireless because it's newer to most people. So here's some pictures of wireless mic systems. Since we're talking about choirs or larger numbers of people, not just one, mostly we've been shopping for quad receivers. This meaning 4 mics at a time, or this one takes 8 at a time. So that's a way of, so like this system has 1 power plug. If you bought 8 different single mic systems, then you'd have 8 power plugs, and it might work great, but that's a lot of cords to deal with also. So anyway, here are 3 examples that different people have bought that we know. So the way that it works is you have your microphone has batteries inside because it's got electronics inside. It's not plugged into anything. It can't mooch off the mixer and get power from the mixer. It needs its own batteries. So the microphone takes audio signals from the air, of course, and it's a transmitter. It has a little antenna in there somewhere. And so each mic is on a different frequency. That's super important. If they're on the same frequency, they'll fight with each other and it'll sound awful. So each mic is on a different frequency, and then the receiver box needs to be listening to that exact frequency. So this one in the picture has 4 little segments, and each of them needs to be programmed so that it's listening to one of the mics. And then on the back of the receiver, there are audio connections so that you can take the audio signal from the receiver off to your mixer. So a little bit about radio. We've been talking about radio in a few different ways. So the familiar radio frequencies that you've heard of just in daily life are probably FM radio between 87 and 108 megahertz. But the wireless mics use different radio frequencies so that they're not trying to compete or having to fit in with all those commercial radio stations that you know about. We know of wireless mics in the 200 megahertz, 200 to 300 range, some in the 500 range, some in the 900 range. If you see any in the 600 range, then don't buy them because they're not legal anymore. That's one of the issues. There were some changes in FCC rules, and so some used wireless mics are nice and cheap because they're not legal to use anymore. So you have to find out what frequency they use, and if they're in the 600 range, then don't buy those.
This one is 258.5 megahertz. And a lot of ours are in the 500 range.
So so wireless mics, the less expensive ones are fixed frequency, meaning as Catherine looked up, it's like printed on here. This one always broadcasts 258, and it can never broadcast any other. So that means if someone else is near me using the same system of mics, then our mics are going to collide with each other. Or if I buy two systems like this, then the 258 from one system and the 258 from the other system, they're going to fight with each other. So fixed frequency means you can only get one of that kind. If you get the better systems are programmable frequency. Of course, they're a little more complicated because you have to program in the frequency, but that means you can get multiple systems of that kind, and they can all work together. Okay, I'm going to get into the science just a tiny bit. You don't need to know all this, but I wanted to give a visual picture of what's happening in there. So basically what I've done here is I'm going to zoom in on the 500 megahertz frequency range and show you what's going on when your wireless mics are going. So over here on the right, there's a little thing that looks kind of like a calculator with an antenna sticking out. This is a spectrum analyzer. And if you start to need many wireless mics, then you might consider getting one. But if you're talking about 4 or 8 or something, don't worry about it. So a spectrum analyzer looks at all the different frequencies in a certain range and tells you how much signal is already broadcasting on that range. So in this graph here, this goes from 540 megahertz to 600 megahertz. And I made this scan because this is the range that my mics need to work. And I want to know where are the gaps where there's nothing going on. So right here, from like 550 something to 555 maybe, there's a TV station. And it's sending a strong enough signal that I don't want to mess around in that range. I want to put my microphones in this range where there's nothing broadcasting.
This is kind of near our house, right?
Yeah, this is from
So if we went
Marlborough.
50 miles away, we might see a different spectrum.
Right. Each metro area is going to have different TV stations, of course. So you'll have a different situation. So channel 29 apparently is here. It's not as strong as 27, but still, you don't want to mess with those stations for two reasons. One is that you don't want to screw up the TV broadcast because that's illegal, and also because your mics will perform better. They'll have better range and better sound if you can locate them in these gaps. So here's a picture. This is a scan from that spectrum analyzer after turning on 4 microphones. So microphone number 1, it is broadcasting right here on this very narrow range in the gap between TV stations. And here's another, number 2, number 3, number 4. Unfortunately, the number 4, this microphone can only work in this range, and there are TV stations everywhere. So I just chose the furthest away, least strong one, and I said, well, I'm going to use that frequency anyway because I didn't really have a choice. Now, what happens if you turn on 20? It looks like this. It's crazy. It's messy. But you see there's basically one peak for each microphone because they're all on a very narrow frequency range so that they don't interfere with each other. And I tried to locate them as much as I could in these gaps between TV stations. It's not perfect, but as much as possible, you locate them where there's not any interference. So how do you know where the TV stations are? Well, there's actually a website that can help with that, same as the radio thing. This is from the Xlr company who makes microphones. The Xlr Frequency Finder is a little website that tells you what TV stations there are in the range of your wireless mics, and more importantly, where they're not. So like between 530 and 542, there's a gap there. So even if you don't have a fancy, spectrum analyzer, you can use this to figure out where the gaps are, and that can help you choose. There are very fancy tools actually for choosing frequencies, but most people will never need to deal with this. But if you start to run 20 or more microphones, you might want to research this. It's a free program that helps you to choose mic frequencies that both don't collide with TV stations and also don't collide with each other. So one of the strange, mysterious things that wireless mics can do is if they're really close to each other, then they can interfere and cause frequencies on other additional frequencies. In addition to the ones they're intending to broadcast, if you have several of them near each other, they broadcast on other frequencies too. And fortunately, that's a big deal in theater, because in theater, the actors are getting close to each other. But for the most part, in a driveway choir, you're a whole car away, or maybe you're sitting one seat away. So there's not that much of an issue with the mics interfering with each other in this type of event.
Yeah, we had to learn this as we went. There was one car early on in our process that had two singers in it, and both of the microphones weren't working. And I was like, oh, they must be interfering with each other. Well, no, just one of them was in the way of one TV station and the other was in another very crowded area. And we're like, oh, now we can see why those two mics didn't work.
Right. But usually the person muted themselves. Like
yes,
that's
the
the
most common
thing. And then sometimes the mic is interfering with TV station, and like so one of the if you're very close to the antennas, then the mic works better. If you're farther and farther away, the signal gets weaker and eventually it doesn't work at all. So another thing that we'll do sometimes if someone's having trouble is we'll ask them to move their car closer to the audio system. And that makes a big difference, because the closer you are, the better. All right, so here a picture of some audio connectors. I'll be doing a demo in a few minutes and we'll see some of these. So the XLR is that round 3-pronged thing. And this is super common for microphone cables. Almost everybody has seen or heard of probably a 1/4-inch cable or an 1/8 inch. So these connectors are, they're also for audio. They come in a number of different kinds. Mostly you'll see mono or stereo. So mono means it can hold sort of one speaker's worth of information. A microphone is usually mono. It records, it has just one, capsule. It's recording just one channel. And so you could use a mono cable for it. Stereo, you see they're more little rings. This is a picture of a stereo cable, and it can carry a left channel and a right channel at the same time. So this guy has 3 wires, three different places that can connect, and 3 wires inside. This one has only 2 places that can connect and 2 wires inside. So technically this is called a TS, which means tip sleeve. And this one is called a TRS cable, tip ring sleeve. Anyway, sometimes you need to know mono versus stereo, and certainly 1/4-inch versus 1/8 inch. That's pretty obvious. Like it may not fit at all if it's not the right dimensions.
We have all kinds of adapters that will help us.
Yes,
convert.
adapters are very helpful. All right, so I'm going to go downstairs and turn on the tech demo camera.
All right. And if there are any questions while he is moving, do that.
Yes.
Hi, this is not a question, but my name's Nina, and I've been doing some driveway choirs out in Western Mass, thanks to Sandy Gubin turning me onto this. And I just wanted to say that this is the most joyful that I have been during COVID, is when I'm doing a driveway choir.
Oh, that's great.
It's it's just amazing to be able to sing with people without all the glitches of trying to sing on Zoom and things like that. So it's been really wonderful.
I have a tech question about microphone frequencies. We have a GTD 787H, and the microphones in the receiver have numbers on them. And we know that the numbers on the microphone need to match the numbers on the receiver. The question I have is, those numbers are not actual frequency. And if we're trying to find quieter frequency, how do we convert what the GTD audio system is reading out with it? How do we convert that to an actual UHF frequency?
Ask to start video. Click
Got it.
ask to start video.
Okay.
Hello,
All right.
can you hear? Sorry, we're messing around with our.
It's okay. I just want to say Alan had just asked a really intelligent question. It's definitely a question for you, Bryce, but Alan, Bryce was in the middle of doing a technical thing to do the next part of the presentation. So do you either, maybe you could ask that in a minute, because I think it's definitely something he should address, not me.
Sandy, I have a question.
Yeah.
Steve Yulberg here.
Hey, Steve.
What amount of, like, you're going to have this driveway choir time, you've got a bounded time. How
Yeah.
much of it is the setup after everybody gets there to kind of make sure everything's working, so that, and how much then singing time do you allot? And then how much for cat, I mean, you got to hand everything out, get every part, hand everything out, set it up, make sure it's working, then how much singing time to get, and then all that. What's your kind of, how
Yeah.
you plan that?
I think it depends on if you have an experienced group or not. I sing with an experienced group, and so we meet together fairly regularly. And I would say we spend most of our time singing, and maybe a half hour to get everybody set up, if that. So if it's a new group, then it can take a lot longer because people just have no idea what they're doing. And I don't know if Catherine wants to weigh in on that question also.
Muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I would say that we've gotten a lot faster as time has gone on, but it does take, I would say it can't really be done in less than 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes from when the first people arrive, because there's a lot to, people need to be patient and to really not mind having a few technical difficulties to push through. And but we usually slot 2 hours minimum for the whole start to finish, because we know it's going to take a while and we want to have a good amount of time to really dive into an actual rehearsal. Sometimes we just sing through a whole bunch of stuff, but most of the time you really want, if everybody's gone to the trouble to go to a particular location, we want to make it kind of a musically enriching experience.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I'm getting the impression, the take-home message so far anyway, that it'd be a whole lot simpler, easier, and cheaper to go with the wired option. You don't have to keep checking all these frequencies and finding the holes and worrying about having all your microphones set to slightly different frequencies and buying the extra equipment and so forth. And I'm kind of seeing this as a short-term thing until we all get vaccinated and can get back in, with each other. So from my perspective, I would want to limit the complication and the cost, only to end up with this equipment at the end of the day next year and really not need all this stuff.
We're going to talk about wired and wireless trade-offs in a minute, because there are obviously trade-offs, and different groups have gone different ways.
Okay.
We're getting that.
Okay.
I have a question, please. First of all, thank you and my compliments. I got to join one of these. It was just wonderful. I can't describe how it felt to be in harmony, literally, physically. My question is, as you go through this, could you talk about like rough estimates of cost, including the amount of expertise needed and how much time initially and on an ongoing basis we would be asking somebody to bring to that role? Because, most of us are doing these all volunteer gigs. Last comment, kind of an open question. A lot of people with disabilities have paradoxically been experiencing more accessibility during COVID than in normal times. And so I will kind of put out a very open question, which is, back when we can, most of us join in together, might there be options here for the people who can't come this week because they've got a cold, which has been a real problem in my chorus where they take attendance, and just for a smaller number of people who can't always get there because of rush hour or because of mobility, what kinds of options might this open up again when we can meet safely together? I know that's a big question and an open one, but you've been thinking so creatively that I'm going to ask you to think about it. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, certainly this year, a lot of people have learned how to do a lot of new things. Like a lot of people have learned how to do a live stream concert that never would have bothered to do a live stream concert before, for example. We have heard of some groups doing, you know, not just driveway choir, but having some people in person and other people on, you know, on remote. And obviously it's a different experience. It's more technical challenge than just having everyone there in person. But we know how to do it now. We have, you know, a lot of people have the equipment to do such things now when they didn't before. So I'm sure we'll have some capabilities that we didn't before and some knowledge we didn't before. I don't know how driveway choir microphones actually relate to that, but certainly, you know, online, being able to, knowing how to broadcast yourself or knowing how to start a Zoom meeting like we just did, that could certainly be useful for including people who aren't in the rehearsal in person, you know?
Has anybody been writing about the, I'm going to call it hybrid thing of some people in person and some people coming in from a distance?
Don't know.
Okay.
Not that I know of, but I'm really glad that you asked that question, Diana, because it's getting my brain going on options
Good.
and ideas. So, yeah, I like that question a lot.
It also has implications for people who are considering how much money is worth sinking into this. If you think that there might be an ongoing additional resource rather than just, please let us get through to 90% vaccination. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I do think that public schools have been doing this, that they, you know, you talk about asynchronous and synchronous learning, that you're teaching people in front of you and also teaching people online. Tough, but it's done.
All right.
Okay, you want to show us what you have, Bryce?
Sure. Is this other camera, is the close-up camera alive now?
Yeah, it looks like.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start with a relatively simple driveway choir of 4 people. So if you just have a quartet and you want to use wireless, then it can be done this easily. I'm going to plug in one wire and it's going to work, I hope. Okay, so you can see over here, right? So we've got 4 microphones and we have the wireless microphone receiver, which is listening to the 4 microphones. And then this is the FM transmitter, and I've got a radio. So we're going to plug it together and see what happens. So in a minute, I'll show you exactly which ports I'm plugging into which ports. But let's see if we can get it to work first. So I'm using frequency 103.7, which I chose using the radio locator website that I just showed a minute ago. So this guy is turned on, the FM transmitter is broadcasting. So hopefully, if I've done this right, the radio is listening to 103.7. And okay, I don't know if you can hear it. But there's a lot of hum, but the radio is actually working here. Okay, so as you see, we have wireless mic, a receiver that's listening to it, and then audio coming out the back, going into the FM transmitter, and the FM transmitter is transmitting to this area, and then the radio is listening to it. So now I'm going to switch to the close-up camera and show you the different parts here. Catherine, can you stop it? All right, perfect. Okay, so first of all, the microphone. Okay, hopefully if I hold it just right, you can see that it says 15.2. Can you see that?
Yep, we
Okay.
can.
Okay, so 15.2 is this microphone is by GTD Audio, and this product 15.2 means a particular frequency, like maybe it's 579.3 or something like that. They don't bother to put the actual 579.3 on the microphone, partly because it's a lot of digits, and also partly because they're different products. Like they might make a different version of this product where 15.2 means something else. So someone has made a table of what I heard this question, so I'm going into a little more detail. 15.2, there's a table that matches up 15.2 with exactly what frequency it's broadcasting on. Unfortunately, the vendors don't seem to publish that, and they definitely don't tell you before you buy it. Like it's really kind of frustrating. Exactly figuring out exactly which frequency the thing is broadcasting on. But we've got a table that David Newman figured out, and we actually use the spectrum analyzer. But I think the reason that they don't publish is most people don't actually need to know, because what they're going to do is they're going to go to this front panel. Let's see.
Thank you.
So there's 15.2. So you notice there are four panels on the front. So the one that's listening to this mic, 15.2, is on. So from the panel, you can see a few things. Let me turn off this radio for a second. You can see that the microphone is on. If I turn the microphone off, watch what happens. So that's how it shows that there's no signal. There's no connection anymore. So I'll turn it back on. And now it's connecting. And there's a little audio indicator. So these panels are helpful because if one of your singers are having trouble, you can tell sometimes if they've muted themselves. You can tell if their battery is really low, or if they're just disconnected, or too far. If they're not showing up at all, maybe they're too far away or something. Here, I'll mute the microphone and see what it does. So right now it's muted, and now it's unmuted again. So this is one of the things that we like about the GTD Audio ones, that this panel is actually really, really informative. If its battery was running low, there's a little battery down here. That's the battery indicator. So you can kind of tell who's having trouble, who's connected, that kind of thing.
I can just walk up to someone and say, "Can I give you a battery?" Okay.
So the buttons here let us change the frequency, so we could change it to 14.2 or 15.3 or something like that. And then of course you have to change the microphone to match. So let me show you how to do that for a sec. Most of these guys, let's see, I'm doing it upside down, so sorry if I screw up. So here I've changed it to 16.2, and now I've changed it to 16.4. So now it's listening on a different frequency than before, but my microphone is still broadcasting on the old one. So there's a cool little shortcut, which is that most of them have something like this. This red button down here, if I press that, and I hold my microphone in front of the system, then it reprograms the microphone to 16.4, and now it's listening again. Can you switch to the other camera just for a sec? The tech demo. So here's what I did. On the back, the back of the microphone has a little infrared receiver, and I'm just holding it in front of the unit, and if I press that set button, it sends out some infrared and reprograms the mic to the frequency that I've chosen on the panel. So that's just a little shortcut. You probably didn't need to know that. Okay, ready for the other. Back to the close-up, please. Okay, so we have the idea four microphones are being listened to by this quad receiver. So we look at the back of it a little bit. Okay. On the back, we have these antenna ports. Okay. It has to have antennas. And then there are 4 XLR connectors here, one for each mic. And then there's one that says mix out right here. So there are 2 ways of using this. Either you can connect 4 XLRs to the 4 XLR ports and then connect them to your mixer, or you can use this mix out. There's only one mix out because it combines the sound of all 4 people onto a single wire. And so I did that first because it's quicker, it's easier. So the mix out is going straight to the FM transmitter, and that I'll call that a shortcut. It's not as good as taking 4 XLRs to a mixer, but it does work. You don't have as much control, but it allows you, it's a simplification, which is sometimes useful. Okay, so I've plugged this straight into the FM transmitter. FM transmitter, this guy has an up and a down button, so I can broadcast on different frequencies, but I wanted it to be on 103.7. Let's see, I think this one also has a higher power and a lower power mode. Basically, you want to choose the lowest power that you can get away with. Generally, you're allowed to run an FM transmitter that can reach about 200 or 300 feet. If you get a super powerful one that can reach miles and miles, then you're breaking the law. You're not supposed to do that. It can reach a few hundred feet, and so you should use the lowest power transmitter that works well enough for you. Of course, there's the radio. There's nothing special about the radio. I just tuned it to 103. We like this. This is a sort of boombox style. Generally, a larger radio has more space for a better FM tuner, right? So a larger unit will have higher quality sound, and like it has an actual antenna, and it has digital control over the radio station, which is much better than a little knob because the knobs are a pain in the butt. Okay, so next I'm going to bring in a mixer. So you notice I did this entirely without a mixer because several people have asked, well, what's the simplest driveway choir system there is? So if there are 4, like a barbershop quartet, just 4 people, you don't necessarily need a mixer. This could work for a group of 4. But if you want more control over the sound, or you're starting to have more people, or you're going to use wired mics, then you start to want a mixer. This mixer is called a Zoom Live Track 12. There are simpler ones, there are more complicated ones, there are many kinds of mixers. But we chose this guy. Let's see. You can mostly see it. We chose this one for a few reasons. It has, there's a USB in the back where we can record from the mixer. We can plug the mixer straight into a laptop and record and also play things back using the laptop. So that's a helpful feature of sort of the bottom of the line mixers will just be audio, and then you can, and stereo comes out, and that's it. This guy can record 12 different tracks through the USB all at once, and that's helpful, but not required if you're looking for the minimal system. So I've plugged in 4 XLRs here, the little colorful ones, and I'm going to plug them.
I like the color coding because then we can tell who has what, and it doesn't get all confusing.
I'm going to plug them into the back of the receiver. Okay, now this time I'm not going to use that mix out port anymore because now I've got the 4 XLRs plugged in. So now instead, the sound is going to go into the mixer, and then from the mixer, it's going to go into the FM transmitter. So yeah, one thing I didn't show. Let's see. Sorry, can you switch back to the close-up?
Hang on.
Okay. One thing I forgot to mention on the FM transmitter is this guy has two places you can plug in audio. One is labeled audio. Can you see that sort of? One is labeled audio over here, and one is labeled mic. So if you're plugging directly into a microphone, then you have what's called a mic level signal, and you plug into the mic side. If you have a line level signal, which is what would come out of a mixer or a computer or a phone, then you plug into this other side, which is expecting a line level signal. So because I'm coming from a mixer now, I'm going to plug into the audio side. All right, I got to plug this mixer in or it won't do very much.
You want the other one now? Okay.
Sure. So even with a group of 4, some reasons that you would want a mixer, you have better control over the volume of each person. You can adjust like treble and mid and bass sound. You can make it so that some singers sound like they're coming from the left speaker, some from the right speaker. That's called panning. You can add reverb. There are a bunch of different things you can control once the sound is going through a mixer. And you can record it with the USB. So those are various reasons, but as I said, you can get away without a mixer for the simplest case. So let's make sure this is working here. Okay, so now, I do a lot of tapping of the microphone because then, like on the mixer, I see some lights lighting up and I can tell which channel the sound is coming from. If I just speak, the other microphones are going to hear it too. And so there's signal coming through all the microphones. But if I tap it, then there's a super loud sound coming from one mic and nothing coming from the others. So check, 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 check. Okay, I can hear the tapping a little bit. So as you saw from Sandy's description, there's the mic input that I'm speaking on. It's coming in from the XLR at the top, and then the knobs are adjusting the gain knob here, and then it's adjusting the sound a little bit, and then these the sliders here called faders let you control how loud this person is relative to the others. So in a choir, you could adjust the different people so that they sound kind of blended. And then over here on the far right, there's the master volume that controls how loud the entire choir is. So this is all the way up. If I turn them down, it doesn't come through at all. So you adjust individuals here, and then you adjust everybody over here. Let's see. I'm looking at my list. What else was I going to say about mixers? Any questions so far?
We have 22 minutes left.
Okay. Another thing I want to show is, or I'll just explain. Of course, if you have wired microphones, you can just plug them into these ports. This mixer has 8 places to put in mics, and so right now I've used 4. So if I have another 4 singers, I would go get another box like this. So now you got 2, and some more mics. So to scale this system, you get more. By the way, when you buy these, you get 4 microphones and the receiver box that matches. So those come together as a product. So if we got more and more of these, we could handle more and more singers. But you see, the mixer only has these 8 ports. So once I have these 2 systems, okay, I'd plug in these 4, and now I'm full. Now what? So if I got a 3rd system, a 4th system, that's when I would start to, if I'm going to use this mixer at all, that's when I would start using the mix out. So that little shortcut that takes just 1 wire out from the back of the receiver, and it plugs into just 1 channel of the mixer. So now you have 4 people going into this 1 box, using up just 1 channel of the mixer. So again, it's not as good as if you have a giant mixer with a port for every single person, but it helps a lot if you want to keep the mixer small and not like taking up your whole table.
Can I ask you a question? Sorry, if you're using a wired system and everybody plugs into the snake, where does that go and how do you get to mix those separately?
The snake is like an extension cord, sort of. At one end it has, let's say it's a 12-port snake. It will have 12 little XLRs sticking out one end. And then there's a big fat wire, and at the other end there are 12 XLRs sticking out the other end.
Oh, okay, so you still plug them all in separately. Same thing.
The snake does not combine people's sound. It's just a really long wire.
I see. Okay.
That is another issue. So with wired mics, you don't have that shortcut. You can't combine multiple people on the same port. You really need to have an XLR port on your mixer for each person. And so I would need a 32-port mixer for all the mics that we use. And those things they're either super wide and expensive, or you might need several mixers chained to each other, like a series of mixers, and that's possible. Or you can get a 32-port mixer that has like nothing but ports, and you control it through an iPad or something. And those work. But we haven't explored that. That's what we do. But with wired, you can't use a small mixer. You can't do that with 4 people per channel trick.
Bryce, you're fading out a little bit in terms of your voice. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that.
Probably come up now, right?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, I did want to show the headphones.
Oh, okay. So I was just explaining on chat that we have one 6-port mixer that accommodates 24 wireless microphones. And then we use this 8-port mixer for our 8 wired mics. And that's how we get our maximum of 32.
Okay, I have 2 different headsets, and I actually use both. You can't wear 2 headsets at the same time. But okay, so this one here is a wired headset that I would plug into the mixer, into one of the mixer outputs where it says phones. So when you're plugged into the mixer, you're hearing exactly what the mixer is going to record. It's the sort of cleanest sound that you could possibly get. But this isn't exactly what the radio people are hearing, right? The radio signal is coming from the mixer through an FM transmitter, through their radio, and then they hear it. So I also, I'll switch between these headphones at different times. I'll also have one of these FM radio headsets, because then I can hear what the radio listeners are hearing. Because it's possible, like if I turn the volume up too high, then it's possible that the radio gets distortion in the radio signal only, even though the mixer is perfectly happy and the recording is happy, but the radio listeners are hearing distortion because I got the levels wrong. So often during an event, I end up wearing these guys, partly because there's no wire I can run around and do stuff, but also so that I can hear if the radio sound has some kind of problem, even though the mixer sound is okay. So I do use both kinds of headsets at different times. This just tells you about radio problems. The other tells you about, levels and a problem that might get into the recording.
Bryce?
Yeah.
You had pictures of you at a keyboard playing and pictures of you mixing. Do you do both at the same event?
Sometimes, yeah. About half our events, maybe a third or something. Catherine has been the director and I've been the piano player. And so what we would do is during the first, 20 minutes or something, like we'll do a choral warm up, and during the warm up, I'll be messing with knobs and I'll be trying to get the different parts to be similar volume and that kind of thing. And then I'll press record, and then I'll just leave the mixer alone for a while and go sing or go play the piano or something.
Because there's really not that much you have to do after you get the levels set. You can really fine tune all these things, but it's really, for most events, it's perfectly adequate to have. And that's where it's a musically enriching experience for us too, that he gets to play the piano and I get to direct.
So I would say for a really complicated piece like the Brahms Requiem, I'm at the mixer constantly and I'm listening for problems constantly. For something that's more like, it's approximately the same volume the whole time, or, it's just piano and voices and, it's not changing. It's not like huge changes in texture all the time. And so, it's good enough. But with all of this, it just needs to be good enough so that you can participate, so that you can do it at all. It doesn't have to sound like the BSO or something. It's if it's good enough that people can hear each other and they can sing together, who cares what it really, if it sounded the very best it could be.
Yeah, that's really been our major goal here, is to get back the process of rehearsing. Anybody can watch a video of the Metropolitan Opera or, those beautiful virtual choirs with 5 million people. But this is really getting to do it in real time and hearing the harmony around you and interacting with people in a musical way.
I guess another part of the answer about the mixing constantly during the event is one of the reasons that I'm using a mixer that records many tracks is because later when we're doing audio editing, if it recorded every group of 4 singers on a separate track, or even every single singer on a separate track, we can rebalance things later. Or if there's like some weird problem, or someone came in too early, or it's possible to adjust some of that later. A mixer that, if you're recording only stereo, you can't really change it. You can't really fix things or adjust things later. But with multiple tracks, you can. So again, that's just trying to make the recording better. And for some groups, they just don't care. They don't care about recording. When do you record all your rehearsals, right? You don't. So if you got to participate in something when otherwise you'd be sitting at home, then you won.
Yep. So I'm going to show you a picture of our entire system now that you've seen the components of it. And so Bryce built this rack that can hold all of that stuff that he just showed you. And these are, sometimes we like to get we thought it was cute to have multicolored windscreens. It turns out they're very hard to wash. They start bleeding into each other and they all turn brown eventually. So now we're just, black is much easier. So let's show you the benefits. Somebody had mentioned this already, and I'm going to be in the wired microphone is better camp. We're going to have a little argument. Okay. So it is absolutely true that wired microphones do not cost as much and are much simpler. All you do is you arrive at an event, you plug into the mixer, and you are done.
Well, so one thing on the wireless side is that because there are no cords, there's less to set up. When you drive into the parking lot and you turn on the mics and you give them to people, you're done. You didn't have to run 20 or 24 cables from place to place and then have to, what if it rains on them, or what if it snows on them, or they get covered in salt or get driven over? Like, that's a real pain.
Also, my kind of microphone does not require batteries, so we don't have to, take them out after every event and make sure that every one of them is new and recharged and all that stuff. It's very durable. And you've probably have a bunch of them in your school, church, home that you've used before.
So if you've got a wire attached to you, you can't just drive away and go to the bathroom and drive back, because if you've got people on wired mics, then like if they're going to even move their car, you have to disconnect everybody and let them do whatever they need to do and then connect them up again. So the setup time is a big deal. Let's see, I mentioned the weather, and you're tied to a particular place.
Yeah, we have a designated parking space, a parking area for the people who are on wired mics when we have our hybrid events, which we'll show you in a minute. We have also, you would need a huge mixer. If we wanted 32 singers all to be on microphones, we would need a mixer that has 32 ports, right. Where this one can consolidate 4 in one port. So,
I would also say that wireless is faster to break down, as you said. You don't, I mean, it takes a really long time to wind up all those cables.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful about them, and also they might not be weatherproofed, because if it's very cold or very hot, the cables are not made for that.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So now we're going to talk about the wisdom that we have learned from the crowd.
Sandy.
Okay, yep. Just to say, so this slide is based on 2 little research projects I did on driveway choir organizers, one using interviews and one using questionnaires. So the project is ongoing. So these numbers might shift, but I think I have a pretty good picture of what's going on right now. So what are people using, wireless or wired? Most choirs, in fact, are using wireless or hybrid. About 60% of people are wireless only, and I'd say about 25% or so are hybrid, so using both methods. How are people paying for this? That's a really good question. So members often donate money for equipment, and in a bunch of choirs, members actually buy their own microphones and cables. Sometimes members have lent the group equipment that they have at home, like spare mixers or spare microphones. And some choirs have like money in their budgets, believe it or not, because like they're not paying rent or whatever it is. So some people just use that money to fund this project. Speaking of donations, donations, I just want to say that this is a particularly great story for people. Let me put it in a different way. Some people have been able to donate, to solicit donations in kind, partly because like the driveway choir story is kind of like catnip to people in need of a happy pandemic story. One group went to the hardware store and they said, here we are, we're trying to get, our choir back together again. And, they told the story of the plucky choir, fighting COVID and getting together to sing again. And the guy at the hardware store gave them, they told me like about $1,000 worth of equipment just for free. So people want to help, and people do get excited about this, and it's a great human interest story. So in terms of how much people did pay, I would say the most frequent amount I've seen and heard is about $1,500. One choir was small, they spent $425, they already had a mixer. And then the biggest choir, I think, spent $2,000, but that was actually for 2 choirs who purchased it together. Yeah, so do you want to proceed to the next slide? Yeah, okay. So the most popular microphone type was the one Bryce just showed you. It's the GTD Audio 787H. They are a wireless microphone. The most popular FM transmitter was the Redicus one, which was about $100. It's a pretty fancy transmitter. I will say it also is pretty temperamental, and I see a lot of people spending a lot of time on driveway choir Facebook groups, like commiserating about their Redicuses and like trying to figure out how to get it to work, and like there's all these tips. And while we're here, I will just put in a plug. I'm like a cheapo, so I still have my $10 Schoss microphone, and when it's up in my house at the top of my house, I get about 1/10 of a mile radius of reception, and it's been fine, and it doesn't have any weird problems with line noise. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's it for my slide. I'll turn it back to you guys.
All right. So I guess people who don't do this, they're wondering or haven't yet done this. They're trying to figure out what to buy and where the money's going to come from, and learning how to set everything up. A little bit of trial and error is always a part of this project. But we also, because Bryce and I don't have one particular group that we work with, I've directed all kinds of different theater groups. So each of our events has had a different clientele. We might do one that has all people who love to read music and are dying to sing the Brahms Requiem. So we, get them together. Maybe we have, people who don't really like to read music, but want to sing a bunch of public domain stuff that everybody would know. Let's sing Amazing Grace. Let's sing Dona Nobis Pacem. And then I would want to have kind of a homogenous group of people so that everybody is working in the same, the right kind of the kind of the same goals. Yeah. Some people have been hesitant about our safety mechanisms, and we're very confident that we have, anytime we've come up with some concern, we've always addressed it right away. And we think that we're extremely safe, but some people haven't really wanted to participate. But a lot of people are just can't get enough of it. So
and I just want to say, I think that it is possible to do this very safely. And I know a story of one choir where there's a woman who's immunocompromised, and she literally does not leave her house except to go to driveway choir. And that's her thing, and she feels safe, and she does it.
35 times, we've never heard of anyone who got sick. So yay.
So weather is certainly an issue. In the summer, there's sun, and you get sunburn, and you get too hot. So we started to use a 10 by 10 pop-up tent, and that has been quite helpful in a lot of different situations. It keeps rain from getting on our equipment or getting onto the conductor or onto the piano. Later in the year, it started to get cold, and so sometimes we would use the tent with walls attached to the sides so that it tent walls so that it blocks the wind a little bit. We eventually started using sometimes a propane heater to warm people up a little bit, or keep the pianist warm. And as you'll see in the Messiah video, when we really go all out, and there's like a pianist who's going to be playing really, really challenging music, and it's going to be 30 degrees. We actually rented a U-Haul truck and set their piano inside the U-Haul with the heater pointing toward them. So that's a little bit insane. We're a little bit insane,
we admit.
But doing the simpler things is simpler, and doing the giant complicated things is more complicated, of course.
But we're going to tell you about how we organize the giant things like the Messiah sing. We had already done one Brahms Requiem and one Fauré Requiem, which were increasing in size. And we said, we'd really like to do Messiah. And I posted on Facebook, anybody want to lead it? Because I'm a conductor, but I don't really know that piece. And nobody bit. So we asked all of the people we had worked with over the summer, and Michael Fitzer said, yeah, I would love to do that. He had a contact with the opera on tap. And so he selected soloists and some of the people who were going to be on microphone. And we had some friends that we wanted to be on microphone. So we kind of designated, like, can I have, 2 sopranos and 4 tenors and whatever. And then we balanced so that those 32 would be a pretty consistent 8 on each part, so that what comes through the radio of each car is going to be a really well-balanced, beautiful choir of competent singers. And then everybody else could come in and make, horseshoe after horseshoe and surround the conductor. And we found a really big parking lot. We kind of hold ourselves to the standard of a drive-in movie theater, because they are what capacity 25% or something in the whole COVID orders. So you take how many parking spaces are in that parking lot, and then you divide it by 4, and you say, okay, and then we send a letter to the Board of Health that says, by the way, we're going to be driving a bunch of people in, and we're going to be super COVID safe. And, they'll check us off and say, okay,
We describe it as, it's like a drive-in movie theater, except safer, because we're not selling refreshments. We're not giving up tickets. People don't have to get out and wait in line for things. So for restrooms, unfortunately, most places don't allow us to use restrooms. So we say, well, here are the 3 nearest gas stations, and buy something from them and be nice to them. But we can't offer restrooms. Also, for a large event, we felt the need to register people, partly so that we knew who was there, in case of there's like contact tracing or something, and also to be able to control how many people know about it and how many people come. So typically we would have like a Google form or something, hey, I have a picture of it right here.
Okay.
So we would make an invitation page and we'd ask people to fill out a Google form. And then that builds up a spreadsheet of who can come on which days. By the way, yeah, Saturday versus Sunday, that's because, you know, in case it's too rainy or snowy or cold or something.
Yeah, we set aside the whole weekend and they know that it might
It's either
up
this
until
day
Thursday
or that day, and we'll tell you, you know, 2 days before.
Right.
So, right, so we did sort of a registration process for the large events, but for smaller events, you know, usually we just work with the leaders or the group or whatever, and we don't feel the need to register for that.
So do you want to see our gigantic event? It's kind of cool because, you know, it's just, oh yeah, you see that the conductor is on a marching band podium that was donated to us for the time being by Burlington High School because their marching band is not in session. So they said we can give it back to them in May. And that's our daughter's toy box that his music stand is on.
There's no sound for the first 10, 20 seconds. I think you were muted.
So I don't know if you have any questions. I know we're a little bit over time, but if you have anything you want to ask us, we're here. How did you do the video recordings?
Right.
We asked people to do selfie videos inside their cars, but we also got some guy who said, hey, I'm a videographer for church choirs and I normally do things all through the Christmas season and I have nothing to do. Can I do this for you? And we're like, yeah.
He had a camera that he could put on a giant pole. I don't know.
Yeah, it wasn't a drone, but it was really nice to get the whole.
But we've learned to do a lot of video editing, partly for this project and partly for virtual choirs. But yeah, the selfie videos inside the car make it much more interesting to watch, because we did learn that watching a video of just a parking lot is not much fun.
Yeah.
You have to see the people in order to be fun. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment before we go into a whole bunch of questions. If there are people in the Boston area or indeed and they would like to talk about sharing equipment with me or borrowing equipment or coming up with some kind of a way for us to share, I'm really interested in figuring that out and would be happy to talk about it. So I'm just putting that out there.
That applies to people in Western Massachusetts as well for Nina and myself.
I want to just point these Facebook groups out. If you do use Facebook, and you're interested in learning more or possibly starting something, everybody, the people in these groups are very fanatical about this sort of thing, and
incredibly
we're super excited
collaborative
about helping people.
Yeah.
So both of these groups, they're full of like questions about technical stuff or how to organize or who's doing it in this area or that area. That's a great place to.
And we'll
to
make this slideshow available to everyone. So thanks for coming, everybody.
So we can stay for a few minutes if people have questions.
Yeah.
Put it back on gallery so we can see each other.
Well, thank you very much. This was really super. You guys did a great job in organizing and presenting this. I'm very thankful.
Great.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And first I'll say thank you. And also, really, you did a wonderful job of communicating technical information in a way that did not assume prior knowledge on the part of the people listening, nor did it underestimate our intelligence. Great job. Here's the question. What are the limits on sharing the information we get today with attribution? I've told several friends that I'm not going to share the resources I get here today unless they donate $30 to People's Music Weekend, because that seems entirely reasonable. But otherwise, what's ethical and respectful?
Great question.
Well, everything on the Driveway Choir website is already free. This presentation is, since it's part of the conference, I'm assuming that the recording will be, members only for a little while, and then I'm hoping that we can make the recording public after a week or two or something like that, so that more people can get to it. But everything that we've pointed to, everything we've talked about, is already out there available. If you Google for Driveway Choir, you're going to find our website with all kinds of stuff.
And the Facebook groups are really very educational, and also, there are some advertisements and some celebrations of things that have gone well, but lots of questions, and any questions that you have will be very quickly answered.
Yeah. I've rarely been on a Facebook group that was as supportive and like everybody just being, universally helpful and nice. And I think we did put together some pages of resources at the end. And I think that I'm going to call that officially publicly available. So you can feel free to just excerpt those and share them far and wide, because, I think we need that.
And I also wanted to say that this part of what I've learned from this experience is more connection to the wider choral community that I've ever had. I've always been a choral director who's in my own little world with my own little friends, but now, you know, at the beginning I could name maybe 5 other choral directors, and now I know hundreds, and it's just, I kind of feel more connected than I did before COVID.
I'm normally more of a pianist than a singer. And I have to say, I've sung more in the last year with other people than I did previous years.
Yeah.
Because
we always get to sing.
We've kind of made this kind of an obsession, as you can tell. We've kind of done it every week because it's been a project a musical project that you can plan and actually do, as opposed to all the other musical projects that have had to be canceled. So.
Mm-hmm. And to your point, Diana, I think we have grown so far from we've had to learn everything that we know because neither of us was really experienced. And some of the really truly audio people are like, oh my God, you use that kind of crap, you know. Yes, we do, because our whole goal has been, we want as many people as possible to know about this. We want it to be simple and inexpensive, and everybody please do it.
Right.
So that's our goal.
We're using $70 microphones, which might sound like a lot, but if you look at a professional theater or something, they're using $600 wireless microphones, and they don't want to touch these pathetic little ones.
Yeah, they're junky.
But they're perfectly good enough for a choir. They might not be good enough for like the soloist in, you know, Jean Valjean or something. You'd use an expensive microphone for him. But for a choir, we're all our sound is going to be mixed together anyway, and so it's a little more forgiving for less expensive equipment.
And you know, it'll have problems, but that's part of the whole.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, and I actually have been using. Don't tell anybody in the sound world, but I've been using $13 microphones, and for our group, nobody. They're fine. You know, so they're wired, I should say.
Which one is that, Sandy?
I think I actually put something in the chat to you about it. It's a Pile. It's
okay.
Pile MIC T34.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're super cheap versions of a lot of things, and also they're used versions of a lot of things out there.
Yep.
Well,
thanks so much.
I really want to say that I have, and I said it in the chat also, but I have rarely seen presentations where people not only know their stuff as well as you guys do and many different layers of stuff, but have organized it for the presentation so beautifully.
Thank you.
I learned a lot, and I was also just really moved by what you guys have been able to do.
Ben, can I ask, since you're in New York, you're going to have trouble with parking, right?
I don't know that it would really work in New York. I happen to be in Boston a lot. In fact, I really wanted to come to this event, but I didn't get to try. When I first got to registering, it was a waiting list, and it was late during that as well. So I was so sorry to miss that event last week. But I've been thinking about doing it in the Boston area, and I gather that Sandy has been thinking about making that happen here. And so Jim, thank you for asking that. I've already been thinking about whether it would be doable in New York. And I've seen the video in which people were outside of their cars. And I thought, you know, maybe somehow in a park space or something, but it's the logistics in New York.
I've seen parking garages. I've seen people on steps very wide apart with masks on. There are all kinds of, you know, and if you can use microphones and headsets, it doesn't really matter. It's hard if you're 12 feet from another singer. It's very hard to hear and not to oversing. But if you have, you know, headsets so that you can feel as if you're really close to them, there are so many things possible.
Right. We know some groups who don't use cars at all. They just use wireless mic, wireless headset, and then they just stand outside really far apart in a field.
I would like to, I put in the chat contact information for Professor Lindsay Marr, who's the best person in the United States for thinking about the safety of aerosols and COVID. And one of the things people can do is buy for something like $30 a CO2 detector. And you can also do this, anybody can do this if they're trying to figure out whether it's safe to meet with their friends on their little tiny porch or something. You can use a CO2 detector, which is an extremely good proxy for emitted aerosols. If it's below 600, you're good. So if you're thinking about something outdoors, you could actually sort of test drive that. But the thing Professor Mars suggested is think about this. If people were smoking cigarettes, and this is how many of you there were, how far apart you were, would you be smelling their smoke? If so, yeah, that's an aerosol exposure that's COVID relevant.
Oh. Good.
I would guess that inside your car, you would not be able to smell it.
Correct. Oh, also, by the way, members of one of my choruses thought, oh, it's cool, we're all wearing face shields. That can actually magnify the exposure, particularly of people behind you.
You guys, if you look in the chat, I did put some academic articles about aerosols and what's it called, that map how aerosols spread, just to this very point.
Great, thank you.
I think we're going to add a slide to our presentation that has everything in chat, so you'll be able to preserve that.
Great.
Nice.
Wonderful. This has been so great.
Okay.
I
Sandy,
keep learning more and more.
Sandy, did you want to say, if you fill out a Google form so that we can email you?
Oh yeah, I've been putting that in the chat periodically, but I'll say it out loud. So to get like a information about the presentation, if you want to get a copy of the chat and other stuff, just put your name in the Google form, and I will put that little ad in one last time. There it is. I see a number of people have already signed up.
And enjoy the rest of your workshop.
Oh, I'll say one other great thing you've done. I have a friend who, has a tiny bit of income from this and that and the other church choir. And they've all decided to cut his salary to the point where he really can't live anymore because he can't have the choir anymore. And this is giving him some options. So you have made a major contribution to the care and feeding of itinerant choir directors too.
And hopefully some impact on the mental health of singers everywhere.
Yes.
I could not take no for an answer. So we were like, let's just ask how instead.
Yeah.
Yay.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. And feel free to join those Facebook groups, or if you go on Driveway Choir, it shows an email address, which is like info@drivewaychoir.org. You'll find it on the website. That reaches both of us and also some other people who can answer questions too.
And if you do start your own driveway choir, fill out my form telling about what you're doing so I can share that information with other new people. The links are on the Facebook group.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Take care.